Before we get to the story, I'd like to say thanks so much for visiting my new channel. I'm going to be uploading cosmic horror-related stories every single day. So if that sounds good, please drop a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It means a lot, especially when just getting started. I hope you enjoy the story. I need to tell someone what's happening at the Western Radio Astronomy Station. I've been working there for 8 months now, and in that time, I've learned things about the universe that have changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. My name is Silas Cobb. I'm 33 years old, and I was chosen to listen to the void. I didn't know what that meant when I took this job. I thought I was signing up to be a night security guard at an abandoned government facility, walking empty hallways and checking locked doors until the sun came up. Easy work for decent pay. I understand now what I really signed up for, what I have become, and what waits in the silence between the stars. The Western facility sits in a remote valley in West Virginia, surrounded by dense forest on all sides and protected by what they call a radio-quiet zone. No cell phone towers for 50 miles in any direction. No wireless internet. No electronic noise of any kind that might interfere with the massive telescope dish that rises above the trees like a great metal ear pointed at the sky. The valley is so isolated that you can drive for an hour on winding mountain roads without seeing another car, without passing a single house, without any evidence that other people exist anywhere in the world. Just endless trees and rolling hills, and a silence so complete it presses against your ears like something alive. I found the job posting online 6 months after losing my position at a warehouse in Pennsylvania. I'd been searching for work desperately, applying to everything I could find, watching my savings dwindle while my bills kept coming. The posting was vague, but intriguing. Night security position at a remote research facility. No experience necessary. Competitive pay. I applied without thinking too hard about why a supposedly decommissioned government station would need a night guard, or why the salary was nearly double what similar positions offered. The interview took place at a coffee shop in a small town about an hour from the facility. A man in a grey suit met me there, bought me a cup of coffee, and asked questions that should have raised red flags. Could I handle extended periods of isolation? Was I comfortable spending nights in complete darkness? Did I have family or friends who would worry if I didn't check in regularly? That last question made me pause, but I answered honestly. No. There was no one. My parents had passed years ago. I had no siblings, and my last relationship had ended badly enough that I'd stopped trying. I was alone in every way that mattered. The man smiled when I said that, though the smile didn't reach his eyes. He told me I was perfect for the position and handed me a key card and a set of instructions. Report to the facility the following Monday at 8 in the evening. Walk the perimeter once at the start of the shift. Check all accessible doors. Sit in the security office and monitor the cameras until dawn. Don't enter restricted areas. Don't touch any equipment. Don't ask questions. I followed those rules for almost 3 months. I drove out to that isolated valley every evening as the sun went down, walked the same hallways in the same order, sat in the same chair watching the same monitors show the same empty rooms. The building was a squat concrete structure with no windows, built during the Cold War and showing its age in every cracked tile and flickering fluorescent light. Most of the doors were locked, sealed by keycard readers that flashed red when I tried my card. My access was limited to the security office, the break room, the bathrooms, and the main entrance. Everything else was off limits, and I learned quickly not to test the boundaries. The isolation was crushing at first. Hours upon hours of silence broken only by the hum of the heating system and the occasional creak of the old building settling. I started talking to myself, just to hear a human voice, carrying on conversations with no one about nothing in particular. But gradually, I adjusted. I brought books to read during the long shifts. I listened to the radio when I could get a signal, which was rare. I learned to appreciate the solitude, the absence of demands and expectations, the freedom of being utterly alone with my thoughts. The monitors in the security office showed feeds from cameras positioned throughout the facility and around its perimeter. The parking lot, usually containing only my car. The main entrance, a heavy door that never opened during my shifts. Various interior hallways, frozen images of linoleum floors and institutional walls. The telescope dish outside, rotating slowly against the stars as it tracked something I was never told about. Most of the feeds were completely static, unchanging from one night to the next, so still they might as well have been photographs. But one monitor was different. It was labeled Control Room A, and instead of showing a camera feed, it displayed nothing but grey static, flickering, shifting noise that never resolved into anything recognizable. I learned quickly not to stare at it for too long. Something about that static gave me headaches, a pressure behind my eyes that would build the longer I looked. And sometimes, in my peripheral vision, I would catch glimpses of shapes moving in the grey, figures that vanished whenever I turned to look directly at them, faces that were almost recognizable, mouths that seemed to be speaking words I couldn't quite hear. Around midnight every night, I would hear something through the walls, a low hum, deep and resonant, seeming to come from somewhere below me, from parts of the building I didn't have access to. It wasn't quite mechanical, though it had that quality of machines in operation. It was more like a vibration, a frequency that I felt in my bones as much as I heard with my ears. The first few nights, I reported it in my log. No one ever responded or acknowledged my notes. Eventually, I stopped mentioning it. The sound became part of the routine, like the static on the monitor and the silence in the halls. 3 months into my employment, I found a door standing open that had always been locked. It was during my usual patrol, around 1:30 in the morning. I'd walked these hallways dozens of times, knew every door and every corner, could navigate them with my eyes closed. But that night, at the end of a corridor I rarely visited, a heavy metal door was standing ajar. Cold air drifted through the gap, and beyond it, I could see only darkness, a stairwell, concrete steps descending into the earth. I stood at the top of those stairs for a long time, my flashlight in one hand, my heart pounding against my ribs. Every instinct told me to close the door, walk away, pretend I'd never seen it, report it in my log, and let someone else deal with whatever lay below. But something else pulled at me, a compulsion I couldn't name or resist. I felt drawn to that darkness the way I imagine a moth feels drawn to a flame. I descended. The stairs went down 3 flights, each colder than the last, the temperature dropping until my breath fogged in my flashlight beam. At the bottom, I emerged into a large room, that shouldn't have existed on any blueprint. It was filled with old equipment, computer banks from decades past, with spinning tape reels and blinking lights, oscilloscopes with analog dials, signal processors and receivers, and machines whose purpose I couldn't guess. Everything was running, humming with power, as if someone had built this room in 1962 and simply left everything turned on ever since. At the center was a console with a single chair facing a wall of speakers, and from those speakers came a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard. Not static, not music, not any signal I could identify. It rose and fell in waves, patterns that almost made sense, frequencies that seemed to resonate with something deep in my skull. On the console was a pair of headphones, old, worn, the leather cracked from decades of use. I knew I shouldn't put them on. Every rational part of my mind screamed at me to turn around and leave. But I sat down in that chair anyway. I placed those headphones over my ears, and a voice spoke directly into my mind, bypassing my ears entirely, arriving in my thoughts fully formed. Finally, you're listening. I tore off the headphones and ran, took the stairs 3 at a time, burst through the door at the top, didn't stop until I was in the security office with the door locked behind me. I finished my shift in a daze, jumping at every shadow, flinching at every creak of the old building. When dawn came, I drove home and sat in my apartment for hours, shaking. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the voice. Every time I started to drift off, I felt something pressing against my thoughts, vast and patient and desperately wanting to communicate. The next night, I almost didn't go back. I sat in my apartment watching the clock, telling myself I would quit, disappear, never think about Western again. But at 7:45, I got in my car and drove to the facility anyway. Something pulled me back, the same force that had pulled me down those stairs. When I reached the security office, a file folder was waiting on my desk. Yellowed documents, decades old, that no one could have placed there during my shift. I opened the folder with trembling hands and began to read the true history of the Western Radio Astronomy Station. In 1962, the telescope had received a signal from a region of space that contained nothing. No stars, no galaxies, no detectable matter of any kind, just void, empty space that should have been silent. But something was transmitting from that emptiness, something structured and intentional, a communication from a place that shouldn't exist. Scientists tried for years to decode the signal. They analyzed its frequencies, searched for patterns, developed theories about its origin. Every attempt failed. The signal resisted understanding in ways that defied explanation. What they discovered instead was something far more disturbing. The signal needed to be heard. It required a listener, someone to sit in that chair, put on those headphones, and acknowledge its existence. Without an audience, it became agitated. It reached out in other ways that the early researchers documented with clinical precision and barely concealed terror. In 1978, they tried to shut down the program, turned off the equipment, sealed the basement, walked away. Within days, people in the surrounding area began experiencing nightmares, whispers in empty rooms, shadows that moved wrong, a feeling of being watched that spread outward from the facility like ripples in a pond. The effects intensified the longer the equipment stayed off. People disappeared. Others went mad. By the end of the week, the researchers had turned everything back on. Someone had to listen, always, without interruption. The file contained records of everyone who had held my position before me, dozens of names stretching back 60 years. Security guards, researchers, volunteers, anyone they could find to sit in that chair and put on those headphones. Each one had eventually found the basement. Each one had become a listener. And each one, after months or years of service, had either disappeared without a trace or lost their minds completely. The most recent name was dated 8 months before I was hired. A man named Conrad Phelps. According to the file, he had simply vanished one night, leaving his car in the parking lot and no indication of where he had gone. I was his replacement. I had been chosen to fill a vacancy that no one had ever explained to me. I sat in the security office for hours after finishing the documents, staring at the static on Control Room A's monitor. I understood now what that static was. A window into somewhere else. A crack in the wall between our reality and the void. I went back to the basement the following night. The door was unlocked again, waiting for me. I descended the stairs with the resignation of a man walking towards something he cannot escape, sat in the chair and put on the headphones. This time, I didn't run. I listened. Over the following weeks, I learned to understand the transmissions. The voice wasn't malevolent, not in any way I could define. It was simply vast and ancient and desperately, achingly lonely. It existed in a place without light, without time, without matter or energy or anything we would recognize as reality. Just endless emptiness, an infinite void that had somehow become aware of itself. It had been alone since before our universe existed. It would be alone after our universe ended. An eternity of isolation with nothing but itself for company, nothing to see or hear or feel, nothing to mark the passage of time that didn't exist. It had discovered our reality by accident, found a frequency that could bridge the gap between its nothing and our something. And it had been calling ever since, across the unimaginable distance between what is and what isn't, hoping that something would hear its voice. It didn't want to hurt anyone. It just wanted to be heard, to know that something existed beyond its eternal emptiness, to connect, even briefly, with a universe full of light and sound and meaning. But listening came with a cost. The previous listeners had documented it in their reports, which I found in filing cabinets throughout the basement. Headaches that lasted for days, dreams of floating in absolute darkness, lost time, hours disappearing without memory, reflections that moved wrong in mirrors, a gradual erosion of the boundary between self and other. The voice was becoming part of me, and I was becoming a bridge between worlds. The previous listeners had fought against this. They had resisted the intrusion, struggled to maintain the separation between their minds and the presence pushing in from outside. And the struggle had destroyed them, burned them out like overloaded circuits. I decided to try something different. Instead of fighting, I accepted. I opened myself willingly to the transmission, let the voice see through my eyes without resistance. I shared my experiences freely, the taste of coffee, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of rain on a window. Small things that meant nothing to me, but everything to something that had never experienced them. In return, I asked for something no previous listener had thought to request. Time. More than the few years most listeners lasted before they disappeared. A bargain, struck between a lonely man and a lonely void. The voice considered my offer. I felt it weighing the options, calculating in ways I couldn't understand. And then something like agreement passed between us. Not words, not concepts, just a sense of acceptance. A deal made in the darkness beneath a telescope that listened to impossible signals. I've been listening for 8 months now. Every night I descend those stairs, sit in that chair, and let the transmission flow through me. During the day, I live something like a normal life. I go to stores, talk to people, experience the world that the voice can only access through my borrowed senses. I'm never alone anymore. The presence is always there, watching through my eyes, feeling through my nerves, learning what it means to exist in a universe of matter and energy and time. Sometimes it shows me glimpses of where it comes from, that endless void where nothing exists and nothing happens and nothing changes. Other times, I show it glimpses of what I experience, the mundane miracles that fill every human day. I don't know how long this arrangement will last. The bargain I struck might give me years, might give me months, might end tomorrow without warning. But I've made peace with my role. Someone has to listen. Someone has to keep the channel open, prevent the void from finding other ways to reach out. And I've chosen to do it willingly, for as long as I'm able. This is my warning to anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. The void is real. It exists in the emptiness between things, in the silence beneath all sound, in the darkness that underlies all light. And it's always looking for listeners, for ears that can hear its call, for minds that can bridge the gap between nothing and something. The Western facility isn't the only place where the signal comes through. There are others, scattered across the world, wherever humans have built machines to listen to the cosmos. Most of the transmissions are dismissed as interference, as equipment malfunction, as noise without meaning. But some of them find their audience. If you ever find yourself alone in a place like this, facing a door that shouldn't be open and a stairwell that descends into darkness, think carefully before you go down. Think carefully before you put on the headphones. Because once you start listening, you can never truly stop. But know that someone has to listen. And if it's not you, it will be someone else. The void always finds its audience, one way or another. And right now, as I write this in the small hours of the morning, I can feel it listening through me, patient and vast and grateful, for the first time in an eternity, to not be alone.